The morning sun peeked through the tall windows of Elite Fitness Center in Dallas, Texas, casting long rectangles of light across the polished gym floor. It was just past 7 a.m., that sweet spot, when the early birds were finishing up and before the mid-morning rush began. The gym hummed with the familiar sounds of weights clinking, treadmills whirring, and the occasional grunt of exertion. In the corner near the free weights section, a man in his early 70s worked through a set of perfect pull-ups. Despite his age, his movements were fluid and controlled, each rep executed with precision that spoke of decades of disciplined training. This was no ordinary senior citizen trying to stay fit. This was Chuck Norris, though he wasn't wearing anything that screamed celebrity. Dressed in simple gray sweatpants and a plain black t-shirt that had seen better days, he blended in with the regular crowd, exactly as he preferred. Chuck had chosen this gym specifically because the owner, an old friend, respected his privacy. Most regulars recognized him, of course, but maintained a respectful distance, occasionally nodding in acknowledgement but otherwise letting him train in peace. That's how Chuck liked it. No fuss, no special treatment, just another guy working. Out, across the gym, a new trainer caught sight of the older gentleman and frowned. Tyler Johnson had joined Elite Fitness just 2 weeks ago after relocating from Chicago. In his mid-30s, with bulging muscles barely contained by a too-tight polo shirt bearing the gym's logo, Tyler considered himself the best addition to the staff in years. His training philosophy was simple, loud, intense, and always drawing attention to himself. The more clients watched him, the more they signed up for his premium training packages. No, higher. Push through the pain, Tyler shouted at his current client, a middle-aged businessman struggling through a set of bicep curls. The trainer kept one eye on his client and another on the older man across the room who had moved on to a complex sequence of bodyweight exercises. Take 5, Tyler instructed his red-faced client who gratefully dropped the weights. Hydrate, I'll be right back. Tyler strutted across the gym floor, adjusting his collar and puffing out his chest slightly. He'd been watching the old-timer for several minutes and couldn't help but notice that several other gym-goers seemed oddly respectful toward him. Probably just being nice to a senior citizen, Tyler thought. But the trainer in him couldn't ignore what he perceived as potential issues with the man's routine. Chuck was in the middle of a series of one-armed push-ups when a shadow fell over him. Looking up, he saw an unfamiliar face wearing an expression that combined condescension with what was supposed to pass for professional concern. "Hey there, Pops," Tyler said, voice booming unnecessarily loud. "Mind if I give you some advice? I'm seeing some form issues that could lead to injury at your age." Chuck paused, right arm supporting his weight with rock-steady ease. A slight smile crossed his face as he slowly completed the push-up and rose to his feet in one smooth motion. At 72, he stood straight as an arrow, his eyes level with the younger man's despite the age difference. "Appreciate the concern," Chuck said quietly, reaching for his water bottle. "But I'm doing all right." Something about the old man's calm confidence irritated Tyler. Who did this guy think he was? In the trainer's experience, men this age were usually eager for guidance, grateful for any attention from fitness professionals. This one seemed almost amused. "Look, I don't mean to bother you," Tyler pressed on, though that was exactly what he was doing. "But I'm the new head trainer here, and I specialize in functional fitness for mature individuals." He emphasized the word with what he thought was tactful delicacy. Those one-armed push-ups are advanced moves that put serious strain on the rotator cuff. For someone your age, I'd recommend starting with wall push-ups and working your way up. A few nearby gym-goers had stopped their workouts, watching the interaction with expressions ranging from disbelief to secondhand embarrassment. A woman on a nearby elliptical machine tried to catch Tyler's eye, shaking her head slightly in warning, but the trainer was too focused on dispensing his unwanted expertise. Chuck took a sip of water, seemingly considering the younger man's words. "I've been doing one-armed push-ups for about 50 years now," he replied mildly. "Never had a problem with my rotator cuffs." Tyler laughed, the sound tinged with condescension. 50 years? Come on, that would mean you started in your 20s. Most people half your age can't do proper one-armed push-ups. He crossed his arms over his chest. "Look, I respect that you're staying active, But there's no shame in adjusting your routine to match your current abilities. The gym had grown, noticeably quieter. Even Tyler's client had stopped drinking his water to watch the scene unfold. The owner of the gym, Bill, a burly man in his 60s who'd been friends with Chuck for decades, emerged from his office and quickly took in the situation. He started making his way across the floor, concern written across his face. "My current abilities are just fine," Chuck said, his voice still pleasant but with a new edge of firmness. "Thank you for your concern, but I know what I'm doing." Tyler's face reddened slightly. Who was this stubborn old man to dismiss his professional advice? He'd been featured in 3 regional fitness magazines and had nearly 50,000 followers on Instagram. He knew what he was talking about. "Look, buddy," Tyler said, his voice rising slightly. "I'm just trying to help. I've got certification from—" "He doesn't need your help, Tyler," Bill interrupted, finally reaching them. "Trust me on this one." Tyler turned to his boss, annoyance clear on his face. "Bill, I'm just doing my job. This gentleman is attempting advanced movements that could result in serious injury at his age. As fitness professionals, we have a responsibility." "Tyler," Bill said firmly, placing a hand on the trainer's shoulder, "do you know who this is?" Tyler glanced at the older man, taking in his calm demeanor and the barely perceptible amusement in his eyes. "Should I?" Bill sighed deeply. "This is Chuck Norris." For a moment, Tyler maintained his confident posture, the name not immediately registering. Then his eyes widened comically as recognition dawned. The Chuck Norris, action star, martial arts legend, the man whose reputation had spawned 1,000 internet memes about his toughness. "Chuck Norris?" Tyler repeated, his voice suddenly an octave higher. "The same," Chuck confirmed with a slight nod, extending his hand. "Nice to meet you, Tyler." Tyler's hand moved automatically to shake Chuck's, his mind racing to process this new information. The firm grip that met his own confirmed what his brain was struggling to accept. He had just been lecturing an 8th-degree black belt in Taekwondo, a 6-time world karate champion, and one of the most recognized martial artists in American history about fitness safety. I didn't," Tyler stammered, his earlier confidence evaporating like morning mist under a hot sun. Around them, several gym members were failing to hide their smiles. Tyler's client had his phone out, no doubt texting someone about the scene he was witnessing. "No harm done," Chuck said graciously, releasing Tyler's hand. "Everyone's just trying to do their job." The silence in the gym stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Tyler stood frozen, his mouth slightly open as he processed the fact that he had just lectured Chuck Norris, an actual living legend, about proper exercise form. A few gym members had stopped pretending to work out and were openly watching now, some with phones discreetly pointed in their direction. Bill, the gym owner, cleared his throat. "Tyler, why don't you get back to your client? I think he's waiting for you." But Tyler couldn't move. His mind was racing through all the Chuck Norris facts he'd heard over the years, all the movies he'd watched as a kid, all the martial arts accomplishments that made the man standing before him a household name. The realization of his mistake crashed over him like a cold wave. I'm sorry, Mr. Norris," Tyler finally managed to say, his earlier confidence evaporating. "I didn't recognize you." Chuck waved his hand dismissively. "No need to apologize. And please, just call me Chuck." Something in the casual way Chuck spoke, the lack of ego, the genuine humility, sparked an unexpected reaction in Tyler. Instead of backing down completely, his bruised pride began to resurface. After all, he'd built his entire career on being the best, the most knowledgeable trainer around. Finding out this elderly man was famous didn't change the fact that Tyler believed his fitness advice was sound. "With all due respect, Chuck," Tyler said, regaining some of his former swagger, "being a movie star doesn't change the science of fitness. Age affects everyone, even legends." Bill's eyes widened in disbelief. "Tyler," he warned, "maybe now's not the time for—" "No, it's—" "Okay," Chuck interrupted calmly. He's entitled to his opinion. He turned back to Tyler with genuine curiosity. What's your background in fitness? Tyler stood a little straighter. This was familiar territory. I've been a certified personal trainer for 12 years. I competed in 3 regional bodybuilding championships, placed in the top 5 each time. I've trained professional athletes and developed my own high-intensity workout system. Chuck nodded, showing what appeared to be genuine interest. That's impressive. The compliment threw Tyler off balance. He'd expected defensiveness or dismissiveness, not this respect. It made his next words come out less confidently than he'd intended. So you see, while I respect your accomplishments in martial arts and films, when it comes to modern exercise science and age-appropriate training, I'm just trying to prevent injuries. A middle-aged woman on a nearby rowing machine snorted loudly, not even trying to hide her reaction to Tyler's continued cluelessness. Others were shaking their heads, but Chuck remained perfectly composed. You know, Chuck said thoughtfully, there's always something new to learn about fitness. The human body is incredible that way. What kind of training do you specialize in? The question seemed genuine, not confrontational, which somehow made Tyler even more determined to prove himself. Here was a chance to showcase his expertise to Chuck Norris himself. My system combines HIIT principles with functional movements and core stabilization. I call it power pulse training, Tyler explained, growing animated. It's all about maximum efficiency and measurable results. Chuck nodded again. Sounds interesting. Would you mind showing me a demonstration? Tyler blinked, caught off guard by the request. You want me to demonstrate my training method? To you? Why not? Chuck asked with a slight smile. I'm always interested in learning new approaches. The gym had grown even quieter now, if that was possible. Tyler could feel all eyes on him. His client had completely abandoned any pretense of working out and was openly watching the exchange. Water bottle, frozen halfway to his mouth. Sure, Tyler said, his confident exterior masking a growing nervousness. We could start with some dynamic movement patterns that show the core principles. Chuck gestured to an open space near the stretching area. Lead the way. As they walked across the gym floor, Tyler's mind raced. He was about to demonstrate his training methods to Chuck Norris. This could either be the greatest opportunity of his career or the most humiliating moment of his life. He decided it would be the former. If he impressed Chuck, who knew what doors might open? Let's start with a simple assessment, Tyler said as they reached the open area, falling back on his standard client routine. I'd like to see your movement patterns in a basic squat. A few feet away, Bill made a choking sound that he quickly disguised as a cough. Chuck, however, simply nodded and positioned himself as requested. Like this? He asked, performing a perfect squat with textbook form. Tyler watched critically, looking for any flaw he could correct. Not bad, he said, unable to find fault with the movement. Now let's try a few more complex movements to assess mobility. For the next several minutes, Tyler put Chuck through a series of increasingly difficult exercises, each of which the martial artist performed with ease. The older man's balance was impeccable, his strength remarkable, and his flexibility better than most people half his age. Tyler found himself running out of assessments. Your mobility is quite good, Tyler admitted reluctantly, but let's see how you handle some more intense movements. Chuck maintained his calm demeanor. Whatever you think is appropriate. Tyler demonstrated a complex plyometric movement, a combination jump that required significant coordination and power. Chuck watched carefully, then replicated it perfectly. By now, a small crowd had gathered at a respectful distance. Tyler could hear whispers and occasional chuckles. His face grew warm with a mix of embarrassment and determination. He needed to find something, anything that would establish his superior knowledge of fitness. Let's try something that really tests core stability, Tyler said, dropping to the floor to demonstrate a particularly challenging plank variation that required balancing on one hand while performing leg movements. It was a move he used to impress clients, one that few people could perform correctly on the first try. Chuck observed, then assumed the position with seemingly effortless control. Not only did he perform the movement correctly, but he maintained a conversation while doing so. This reminds me of an exercise we used to do in my dojo back in the 70s, though we focused more on the breathing pattern with it. Tyler stood up, frustration finally breaking through his professional facade. You're not supposed to be able to talk through that exercise. Chuck rose smoothly to his feet. Why not? If the core is properly engaged and breathing is controlled, speaking shouldn't be difficult. Because it's designed to be maximally challenging, Tyler blurted out, louder than he intended. A beat of silence followed his outburst. Maybe we're approaching this from the wrong angle, Chuck suggested gently. Instead of testing what I can't do, why don't I show you some exercises from my routine? Maybe we could learn from each other. The reasonable suggestion somehow pushed Tyler over the edge. In his mind, this older man, celebrity or not, was making him look foolish in front of the entire gym. His reputation was at stake. Look, Tyler said, lowering his voice but unable to keep the edge out of it. I respect what you did in your prime. The movies, the martial arts competitions, that was all impressive 30 years ago. But fitness science has evolved, and what I'm trying to tell you is that at 72 you need a different approach. I'm the expert here. Bill stepped forward, alarm evident on his face. Tyler, that's enough. No, really, Tyler continued, too far gone to stop now. I challenge you to show me these supposed training methods that defy modern exercise science. Show me what makes Chuck Norris so special that the rules don't apply to him. The gym fell completely silent. Even the usual background noise of machines seemed to have stopped. Every person in the room held their breath, waiting for Chuck's response to what could only be described as a direct challenge. Chuck looked at Tyler for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to everyone's surprise, he smiled. You know what? I accept your challenge. I accept your challenge, Chuck said with a calm smile that somehow made Tyler more nervous than any angry response would have. The gym had become an impromptu arena, with members abandoning their workouts to form a loose circle around the two men. Bill, the gym owner, stood at the edge of the gathering crowd looking both concerned and oddly amused, like someone watching a child about to learn a valuable but uncomfortable lesson. Great, Tyler said, trying to sound confident despite the knot forming in his stomach. Let's see what you've got then. Chuck looked around at their audience and spoke in a voice just loud enough for Tyler to hear. I don't think either of us wants to turn this into a show. How about we move to the private training room in the back? Bill quickly stepped forward. Good idea. I'll make sure it's free. He hurried off, keys jangling. As they walked toward the back of the gym, followed by curious stares, Tyler tried to gather his thoughts. What exactly had he challenged Chuck Norris to do? And why did he feel like he just made the biggest mistake of his professional career? The private training room was spacious but simple. Matted floors, a few weight racks along one wall, and mirrors covering another. Bill flipped on the lights and stepped aside to let them enter. I'll be right outside if you need anything, Bill said meaningfully, looking at Tyler with an expression that clearly communicated, don't do anything stupid. When the door closed, Chuck turned to face Tyler. The trainer was surprised to see no anger or competitiveness in the older man's eyes, just a calm, evaluating gaze. Before we start, Chuck said, I'd like to understand something. Why is it so important to you to prove that I need your help? The question caught Tyler off guard. He'd expected to jump straight into some kind of physical demonstration. It's not about you specifically, Tyler said, shifting his weight uncomfortably. It's about proper fitness principles. Age-appropriate training is something I'm passionate about. Chuck nodded thoughtfully. I understand that. But there seems to be something more personal driving you here. Most trainers, once they learned who I was, would at least consider that I might know what I'm doing. Tyler felt a flash of irritation at being analyzed. Look, I've worked hard to build my reputation as an expert. I've studied, competed, earned my credentials. When I see someone doing exercises that contradict what science says is appropriate for their age group, it's my job to step in. Even when that person shows no signs of struggle or improper form? Chuck asked mildly. Sometimes people don't realize They're causing damage until it's too late, Tyler insisted, though his voice lacked its earlier conviction. Chuck considered this for a moment. Fair enough. So your challenge was for me to demonstrate my training methods? Yes, Tyler said, grateful to move past the uncomfortable questions. Show me what makes Chuck Norris different from other 72-year-olds. I'm not different. In kind, just in training, Chuck clarified. But all right, what happened next would fundamentally change Tyler's understanding of fitness, aging, and humility. Chuck stepped to the center of the mat and began with what looked like a simple stretching routine. But as Tyler watched, the movements flowed, with increasing complexity and precision. It wasn't just stretching. It was a martial arts form executed with flawless control. Each position transitioned seamlessly into the next, combining flexibility, balance, and strength in a way Tyler had rarely seen, even among elite athletes in their prime. After about 2 minutes, Chuck paused. That was a basic warm-up I've been doing for about 50 years. Now for something a bit more intensive. What followed was nothing short of extraordinary. Chuck demonstrated a series of martial arts techniques that combined explosive power with perfect form, kicks that reached head height with pinpoint accuracy, hand strikes so fast they were difficult to follow, combinations that required incredible coordination and body awareness. Throughout the demonstration, Chuck maintained steady breathing and never showed signs of strain. Between sequences, he explained the principles behind each movement, not just how to do them, but why they worked and how they developed different aspects of fitness. The secret, Chuck explained after completing a particularly impressive sequence of kicks, isn't about defying age. It's about consistent training adapted over time. What I do now isn't exactly what I did at 30. I've adjusted and evolved, but never stopped. Tyler stood silent, his earlier bravado completely gone. He was witnessing something that contradicted much of what he'd been taught about age-related training limitations, yet couldn't be denied. What about injury prevention? Tyler finally asked, grasping for some way to reconcile what he was seeing with his training principles. Surely these high-impact movements put stress on your joints. Chuck nodded. Good question. Injury prevention becomes more important with age. Absolutely. That's why form is everything. Watch again. He repeated a spinning kick in slow motion, breaking down each component. Notice how the supporting leg absorbs force through the whole foot, not just the heel or ball. The hip initiates the movement before the leg follows. The core stays engaged throughout. When done correctly, these movements strengthen the joints rather than wear them down. Tyler found himself nodding along, absorbing information like a sponge. Despite himself, he was fascinated. But this is martial arts training, Tyler said. Most seniors can't do this. Most people of any age can't do this without training, Chuck corrected gently. Age isn't the primary barrier, it's training history. I couldn't teach a 70-year-old with no martial arts background to do these movements, just like I couldn't teach a 20-year-old with no background to do them instantly. Chuck took a seat on a nearby bench and gestured for Tyler to join him. The trainer did so, his mind still processing what he'd just witnessed. Let me tell you something about fitness and aging that took me decades to understand, Chuck said. The human body doesn't just suddenly break down at a certain age. It adapts to whatever stress it regularly encounters, or doesn't encounter. The saying, use it or lose it, is simplistic, but fundamentally true. Tyler nodded slowly. We were taught about the progressive decline model in certification classes. The idea that certain high-intensity exercises become inappropriate after certain age thresholds. That model works well for general population guidelines, Chuck acknowledged. But it doesn't account for outliers, people who've maintained consistent training for decades. The decline happens, but the baseline is different. As Chuck continued to explain his philosophy of lifelong fitness, Tyler began to see the gaps in his own understanding. His training approach was sound for most new clients walking through the gym doors, but he'd never considered how it might differ for someone with Chuck's background. I think I owe you an apology, Tyler said finally. I made assumptions based on your age without considering your training history. That was unprofessional of me. Chuck smiled. Apology accepted, though I think there's something else you should know about me that might help explain things. What's that? Tyler asked. I'm not just some actor who did a few karate movies, Chuck said. Before Hollywood, I was a 6-time world karate champion. I've been developing my own martial arts system, Chun Kuk Do, for decades. I've trained special forces units, law enforcement officers, and celebrities. And I hold an 8th-degree black belt in Taekwondo, a 10th-degree black belt in Chun Kuk Do, black belts in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Judo, and I've studied multiple other disciplines throughout my life. Tyler's eyes widened as the full picture came into focus. He hadn't just been lecturing an elderly actor about fitness. He'd been trying to teach one of the most accomplished martial artists in American history how to exercise properly. I had no idea, Tyler said quietly, the magnitude of his mistake finally sinking in. I mean, I knew you did martial arts for your movies, but I didn't realize. Most people don't, Chuck said with a kind smile. And that's perfectly fine. I don't expect special treatment because of my background. At that moment, Tyler understood that he'd been given a rare opportunity, not to challenge Chuck Norris, but to learn from him. The private training room fell quiet as Tyler processed everything he had just learned. The man standing before him wasn't just a famous actor who knew some karate for the cameras. He was genuinely one of the most accomplished martial artists alive. The realization hit Tyler like a bucket of cold water. I feel like such an idiot, Tyler finally said, breaking the silence. He ran a hand through his hair, embarrassment coloring his face. I was trying to teach Chuck Norris how to do a proper push-up. Chuck chuckled, the sound warm and free of mockery. Don't be too hard on yourself, you were doing your job. Most trainers would have concern seeing someone my age attempting advanced exercises. Yeah, but most 72-year-olds aren't you? Tyler pointed out. True enough, Chuck agreed. But that's actually an important point. Throughout my career, both in martial arts and fitness, I've learned that individual differences matter far more than general categories. Age is just one factor among many. Tyler nodded slowly, his trainer's mind starting to engage with the concept, rather than dwell on his embarrassment. We're taught to create programs based on client categories: beginner, intermediate, advanced, senior. But I can see how that might be too simplistic sometimes. Exactly, Chuck said, his eyes lighting up at Tyler's understanding. Categories are useful starting points, but real training happens when you see the individual in front of you, their specific history, capabilities, and goals. Chuck walked over to the weight rack and picked up a pair of light dumbbells. Let me show you something. This is an exercise I developed that combines traditional martial arts movements with modern strength training principles. For the next 20 minutes, Chuck demonstrated a series of exercises that blended elements of Taekwondo, Western boxing, and functional fitness. Each movement flowed naturally into the next, creating what looked like a choreographed dance but was actually an intense full-body workout. The key, Chuck explained between demonstrations, is integration. Many fitness programs isolate muscles or functions. Strength one day, cardio another, flexibility somewhere else. But the body doesn't work that way in real life. Everything connects. Tyler found himself completely absorbed, occasionally asking questions or requesting clarification on certain movements. His earlier defensiveness had evaporated, replaced by genuine curiosity. This is amazing, Tyler admitted after Chuck finished a particularly complex sequence. I've never seen training quite like this. It's taken me decades to develop, Chuck said, setting the dumbbells back on the rack. And it's still evolving. That's another lesson I've learned. A good system is never finished. It grows as your understanding grows. Tyler nodded thoughtfully. In my training programs, I've always prided myself on having everything figured out, having the perfect system. But maybe that's been limiting me. The most dangerous thought in martial arts or fitness is believing you have nothing left to learn, Chuck said. The moment you think you know everything is the moment you stop growing. Something about these words struck Tyler deeply. Wasn't that exactly what he'd been doing? Building a fortress of certainty around his training methods, refusing to consider approaches that didn't fit his understanding? Would you mind showing me that last sequence again? Tyler asked. I'd like to try it myself. Chuck smiled. Of course. For the next hour, The dynamic in the room transformed completely. What had begun as a challenge became a masterclass. Chuck patiently demonstrated movements while Tyler attempted to follow along, sometimes succeeding, often stumbling, but always trying again. The older man offered corrections without condescension, explaining not just the how but the why behind each technique. Keep your core engaged through the entire movement, Chuck instructed as Tyler attempted a turning kick followed by a cross-body punch. The power comes from the ground up through your legs, hips, and finally into your arms. Everything connects. Tyler nodded, sweat beading on his forehead as he tried again. This time, he felt the difference. A smoother transition. More power with less effort, better, Chuck said approvingly. You're a quick learner. The compliment coming from a man of Chuck's stature meant more to Tyler than any fitness magazine feature or social media following ever had. As they moved through more exercises, Tyler began to understand something profound about training that had eluded him despite his years of certification courses and competition. True mastery wasn't about imposing rigid systems on everyone. It was about understanding principles deeply enough to adapt them to each individual's needs and capabilities. No, Tyler said during a water break. In my training sessions, I'm always the one doing the teaching. It feels strange to be on the other side. The best teachers are always students first, Chuck replied. I still take classes and learn from others, even after all these years. Really? Tyler asked, surprised. You still train under other people? Chuck nodded. Whenever I can. There's always someone who knows something you don't. Age or fame doesn't change that. This revelation hit Tyler hard. Here was Chuck Norris, an icon, a legend in his field, still humble enough to be a student. Meanwhile, Tyler had been too proud to learn from anyone he deemed beneath his level of expertise. I think I've been approaching my career all wrong, Tyler admitted, the words difficult but necessary. I've been so focused on being seen as an expert that I stopped being open to new ideas. Chuck placed a hand on Tyler's shoulder, recognizing that as the first step to changing it, and believe me, it's never too late to shift your perspective. They continued practicing for another half hour, with Tyler growing more comfortable with the unfamiliar movements. By the end of the session, he was executing basic combinations with reasonable proficiency. Nowhere near Chuck's level, of course, but showing definite improvement. This has been eye-opening, Tyler said as they finished up, both men wiping sweat from their brows. I came in thinking I was going to teach you something, and instead, we taught each other, Chuck finished with a smile. I learned some interesting perspectives from your training approach, too. That's how it should work. Tyler looked skeptical. What could you possibly have learned from me after everything you know? Your emphasis on biomechanics and the science behind different movement patterns, Chuck replied sincerely. The way you broke down the squat form earlier. That was excellent analytical thinking. That kind of precise understanding is valuable. The problem wasn't your knowledge. It was the assumption that my age automatically meant I needed the most basic version of that knowledge. Tyler nodded, accepting both the compliment and the gentle correction. Fair enough. As they gathered their things to leave the private room, Tyler felt a strange mix of emotions, embarrassment at his earlier behavior, gratitude for the unexpected lesson, and a budding sense of excitement about the possibilities this new perspective opened up. Mr. Norris, sorry, Chuck, Tyler said as they reached the door. Would it be completely out of line if I asked to train with you again sometime? I'd really like to learn more about your approach. Chuck's eyes crinkled with his smile. I'd like that. I usually train here 3 mornings a week. You're welcome to join me. Really? Tyler couldn't keep the surprise from his voice. Really? Chuck confirmed. On one condition. What's that? That you come as a student, not as an expert. We'll both learn more that way. Tyler extended his hand. Deal. As they shook hands, Tyler realized that in trying to challenge Chuck Norris, he'd actually challenged and changed himself. 6 months had passed since that fateful morning when Tyler had challenged Chuck Norris in the gym. The early summer sun now streamed through the same windows of Elite Fitness Center, casting long golden rays across the polished floor. But while the gym looked the same, Tyler Johnson was almost unrecognizable, not in appearance but in attitude. This morning, like many mornings over the past half year, Tyler arrived at the gym at 6:30 a.m., a full hour earlier than he used to. He no longer strutted in with his chest puffed out, no longer wore shirts that strained against his muscles. Today he wore a simple gray t-shirt and black workout pants, his gym bag slung casually over one shoulder. "Morning, Bill," Tyler called, to the gym owner, who was arranging new flyers by the front desk. "Morning, Tyler," Bill replied with a genuine smile. The tension that had once existed between them had long since faded. "He's already here. Started about 15 minutes ago." Tyler nodded his thanks and headed toward the back of the gym where he knew he would find Chuck going through his morning routine. Sure enough, in the corner near the mats, the martial arts legend was flowing through a series of movements that combined elements of several different disciplines. "Sorry I'm late," Tyler said as he approached, setting down his bag. Chuck finished his sequence before acknowledging Tyler with a warm smile. "Just getting warmed up. Ready to work?" "Always," Tyler replied, already beginning his own warm-up stretches. For the next hour, the two men trained together. To anyone watching, it would have been hard to determine who was the teacher and who was the student. They traded techniques, compared approaches, and challenged each other in ways that pushed both of them to improve. Chuck demonstrated the finer points of a Taekwondo form while Tyler suggested variations that incorporated modern functional fitness principles. "Your balance has improved," Chuck noted, as Tyler completed a difficult transition. "You're not compensating with your upper body anymore." Tyler nodded, taking the compliment with quiet pride rather than the boastful reaction he might have had 6 months earlier. "I've been practicing that transition every morning. Still not as smooth as yours, though." "It'll come," Chuck assured him. "Remember, I've been doing this since before you were born." They continued training, their movements drawing the attention of early morning gym-goers who still couldn't quite believe the sight of the famous Chuck Norris training, alongside the once cocky gym trainer who had challenged him. "You know," Chuck said during a water break, "Bill mentioned that charity exhibition the gym is hosting next month. Have you thought about participating?" Tyler wiped sweat from his brow. "I don't know. I'm still learning all this. I'd hate to get up there and mess it up." Chuck gave him an appraising look. "You wouldn't have said that 6 months ago." "Yeah, well," Tyler chuckled. 6 months ago I thought I knew everything. Now I realize how much I don't know. And that," Chuck said with a knowing smile, "is exactly why you're ready." After finishing their session, the two men headed to the gym's small juice bar. As they waited for their protein shakes, Tyler spotted one of his clients, an older woman, in her 60s, struggling with a resistance band exercise across the gym. "Excuse me a minute," Tyler said to Chuck, then walked over to the woman. Chuck watched as Tyler knelt beside his client, speaking in a voice too low to hear from a distance. Gone was the loud, attention-grabbing trainer who shouted instructions across the gym floor. In his place was a coach who listened first, then offered guidance in a way that empowered rather than embarrassed. When Tyler returned, Chuck nodded approvingly. "Nice work with her. Your approach has really changed." Tyler shrugged. "I've realized it's not about me showing off what I know. It's about helping them discover what they can do." Their shakes arrived, and they moved to a small table in the corner. "Did I tell you I dropped my Power Pulse training brand?" Tyler said after taking a sip. Chuck raised an eyebrow. "Really? I thought that was your signature program." "It was," Tyler admitted. "But it was also one size fits all. Now I'm developing personalized approaches based on individual needs and backgrounds. Less flashy, but more effective." "And how's that working out for you?" "Honestly, I've lost some clients who were attracted to the hype, but the ones who stayed are seeing better results than ever, and word is spreading. I've got a waiting list now." Chuck nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes you have to lose something to gain something better. Like my ego?" Tyler laughed. "You haven't lost your confidence," Chuck pointed out. "You've just grounded it in something real." Tyler considered this. "I guess you're right. I used to be confident because I thought I had all the answers. Now, I'm confident because I'm not afraid to look for better answers. The gym was growing, busier as the morning crowd arrived. Several people waved or nodded to Chuck and Tyler, now a familiar pair to the regulars. A few months ago, Tyler might have basked in the attention of being seen training with a celebrity. Today, he barely noticed. "You know what's funny?" Tyler said. "That first day when I tried to tell you how to do a proper push-up, I was so focused on proving I was the expert that I missed an opportunity to learn from one of the best. Now I look for those opportunities everywhere." "That's the true transformation," Chuck said. "Not just in how you train, but in how you approach life." Tyler nodded, remembering how differently things could have gone. That confrontation could have ended with humiliation. Chuck could have embarrassed him in front of everyone, could have complained to Bill and gotten him fired. Instead, it had become the catalyst for the most important growth in his career and personal life. "I've been thinking about what you said about teaching and learning," Tyler said. "I'm starting a new program at the community center next month. Free classes for seniors to keep active and maintain mobility. Nothing flashy, just practical movements to help quality of life." "That sounds valuable," Chuck said. "Need any guest instructors?" Tyler looked up in surprise. "Are you serious? You'd do that?" "Why not?" Chuck smiled. "I might learn something new." The next month, the charity exhibition at Elite Fitness Center drew a larger crowd than any previous event. People had heard that Chuck Norris would be there, but many were surprised to see him participating in a demonstration alongside Tyler. The two men moved through a series of techniques that showcased the blend of traditional martial arts and modern fitness principles they had developed together over the past months. Their movements complemented each other. Chuck's decades of experience evident in his perfect form, Tyler's strength and adaptability clear in his execution. When they finished to enthusiastic applause, Bill stepped forward with a microphone. "Thank you all for coming to support our fundraiser for the youth sports program," he said, "and special thanks to Chuck Norris and our own Tyler Johnson for that amazing demonstration of how martial arts and fitness can benefit people of all ages." More applause followed, and Tyler felt a strange mix of pride and humility. 6 months ago, he would have reveled in being the center of attention. Today, he was more focused on the money they'd raised and the message they'd shared about lifelong fitness. After the event, as they gathered their gear, Chuck placed a hand on Tyler's shoulder. "You've come a long way," he said. "Not just in training, but in understanding what it means to be a teacher." Tyler nodded, truly hearing the compliment rather than just using it to feed his ego. "I had a good example to follow." As they walked out of the gym together, Tyler reflected on how a moment that could have been his greatest embarrassment had instead become the turning point in his life. He had challenged Chuck Norris without knowing who he truly was, but in the process he had discovered who he himself could become. And that transformation was worth more than any championship or social media following could ever be.